House Education Committee, January 24th, morning session. We're going to open with a discussion. I apologize to the committee. It's going to be mostly financial in nature, more so than education in nature. But we need to tell the Appropriations Committee how we want to weigh in on the Budget Adjustment Act. And part of that is money that is basically unspent and would sort of revert to the bottom line of both the general fund and the education fund. So we're going to find out a little bit more about those numbers today, and with some folks from the AOE. And Brad, who would like to begin?
I think Sean, I want to let Sean again bring forward the slide.
Okay, great. Sean Cousineau, can you hear us okay?
I can. Are you able to hear me?
Yep, welcome. We are all going to pull up your slide deck on our devices, so no need to share your screen.
Okay.
And kind of begin, just introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Great. Yeah. I'm Sean Cousineau. I'm from the Agency of Education. I'm the Deputy Chief Financial Officer with the agency. And yeah, we're ready to share our FY22 carryover presentation. Thanks for having us today. You see Brad is there as well, and I'm sure he'll chime in. So going over our agenda, we're going to cover the general fund and education fund carryover and reversion of funds. I'm happy to take any questions.
I'm just going to stop for just a quick second, just to remind people that most of the Agency of Education runs on general fund dollars, and education fund dollars, by and large, go to districts to run their operations.
Does that include the federal funds that comes to the AOE?
In terms of what? They're all general fund dollars.
Okay.
Well, no, I'm sorry. No. They are mostly education fund dollars, except for what they need to spend for administrative jobs. But anyway, let's go through the presentation.
Okay.
All right, John, thank you.
Okay. So our slides are going to show a summary of the carry forward and the amounts available for reversion per our FY22 year-end closeout. We're going to first start with general fund. And
I just want to be clear, carry forward means you'd like to be using this money in FY24.
Yes. So I can define the terms if you'd like.
Sure.
So carry forward is the part of the year-end balance in an appropriation that we were approved to carry forward into the next fiscal year to spend in addition to our approved budget for the year. The funds are used, usually used for grant obligations or contract obligations that we anticipate we need from activity from the prior year. And then when we're reverting funds, it's the part of the year-end balance in the appropriation where we don't have an obligation or a need for the funds. So we'll revert it back to the general fund or education fund.
Thank you.
Sure. So starting out with our finance and administration appropriation, we ended the year with about $73,000 left over in general fund. We have a $19,600 contract obligation, and then we needed to carry over about $53,000 to cover a budgeted shortfall in our FY23 budget. That leaves a small amount to revert back to the general fund. Our next appropriation is our education services appropriation, and we ended the year with $469,000 with a small contract obligation and about $230,000 in grant obligations. Again, here we also needed to carry $44,839 for a budgeted shortfall for 23. And we carried $25,000 per Act 74 for the post-secondary adult education training system. And then we had several other initiatives, as you can see on the slide, to carry over into FY 24 or 23, I guess. Yeah, get my years mixed up. And then
Right.
we had 3870 left to revert.
This is a big number, so I'm going to ask this question now. It's fair to say that carry forward dollars are generally already obligated, as you say, to grants to be awarded, contracts to be fulfilled.
Yes, for the most part. And then if on that slide, the education services slide, we had a couple initiatives that were approved by the administration, the internship program, and a modernization project for pathways. So those are a couple examples where it's new work that we got approved for.
And this approval comes from the administration.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We send a carryover memo in late summer with our requests, and then we wait for approval. Yep. So slide number 7, we've got these are grant only appropriations, and we carried over about 260,000 for the adult ed and literacy appropriation, and we're reverting 7,100. The flexible pathways appropriation, we carried 600,000 for our dual enrollment program's spring semester obligation, and we're reverting an additional 182,000.
And so just to be clear, is that generally reflective of the dual enrollment program didn't get used as much as was budgeted for?
I would say so, yeah. So it's dual enrollment is when high school students can earn college credit for classes they're taking in high school. So I think it varies on how many students take advantage of that. Yep. Moving to slide 8 is the state board appropriation. And here we've got a small contract obligation, and we're carrying 10,000 for anticipated legal expenses. And we had a reversion amount of 54,000.
So could you talk a bit, that's an organization with a small budget as it is, and how is it able to revert almost $55,000?
Yeah, I believe they carried over a large amount in the previous year, possibly for the same reason, anticipated legal expenses that maybe never occurred.
All right, but you're not quite sure. I know
Right.
somebody suggested that perhaps it's because they are not meeting in person, so a lot of the expenses that go to meeting in person have been saved and carried forward.
That could be as well. Sure. Yep.
All right, and since that sort of wraps up the general fund portion, I'm just going to hold there, look to the committee for questions, and I also would welcome questions from Representative Beck from Ways and Means, who's also joined us if he has any.
I don't like that.
Okay. Sri, would you remind me your question?
Just all federal funds, like,
Oh, okay. Could you just give it a mini Brad, or you can sort of talk to us how federal funds either flow into the general fund or flow into the ed fund?
and the amount.
Was that a question for me?
Yeah, so I'm gonna pause there and basically put people on the spot who aren't expected to be put on the spot. So the chair of the State Board of Education just joined us at the point at which we are talking about a $55,000 reversion in state board funding. And I guess, Jennifer, if you have any insight as to this $55,000 reversion of unspent dollars.
You want me to stay here?
Yeah, you can actually, why don't you come and join us very quickly and introduce yourself? You could not have walked in at a better time.
Showing up late to class.
And I also will say, welcome. Many of us have seen Jennifer over the years on the screen only. First time in the State House, correct?
In this capacity, for sure, yeah.
Excellent.
Well, thank you guys for having me back. I'm Jennifer Samuelson, Chair of the State Board of Ed. So the question is the $55,000, which I believe is left over from FY '23. So that's a tricky one to answer because I think what the state board has been working toward with the Agency of Education is figuring out how to sort of divide up the assets of the rules and regulations that pertain to education law. We've not finished that process yet. I know that good work was made last year, and I believe that there was a report that was submitted to the House and Senate Ed committees. I've spoken with our Vice Chair, Tammy Colby, who is the chair of that subcommittee. And the plan is, because we're currently in the middle of EQS and about to get that launched into rulemaking, is to, in February or March, sort of get back together or reconvene the subcommittee and work with the agency to see what further progress we can make, with the hope that we would then be able to come back this spring to say, this is how we would like the General Assembly to sort of split up these roles and responsibilities. I think it is clear, at least to me, that we do need our own dedicated legal counsel. There are hiccups that happen because we have been very fortunate to have the advice of the Agency of Education on occasion, but not always. And so I think because we are sometimes operating in different capacities, looking at different sides of issues, I think it would be really helpful for us to have our own legal counsel. So I would really advocate for that money to be earmarked to allow us to do that. But I don't have a final number for you because I think that number is really going to be dependent on what the workload is that is being given to the State Board of Ed.
Would you, so you're not talking about hiring a staff attorney, but rather to have a fund that you could use to hire?
Well, no, we were thinking, because right now, we first looked to the Agency of Education. The next step is to ask the Attorney General's office for guidance. And if neither one of those two avenues works, then we, put a contract out to bid. But I can tell you, we put a contract out to bid. I think the issue was identified, and I want to say late September, early October. We just got the attorney, signed contracts, ready to go 10 days ago. So that's how long it took from the time that we identified, that we really benefit from legal assistance to actually being able to have someone to give us that assistance.
But this is a private practice attorney who's advising.
Correct. So I think it would be helpful if we had someone where, like, when legal issues arise, we could pick up the phone, shoot an email, and just have someone there, be serving that role for us.
All right. I think maybe we'll circle back to this so that we can keep our AOE folks moving along here. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
In person.
All right, any further questions about sort of the general fund side of things? Sean, do you have anything more to add before we move to Brad, or are you handling the next portion?
No, I'm set with general fund if Brad's available.
From an accounting point of view, I know you're not a policy person, but basically a reverted amount of money is money that is available should the powers that be, perhaps the General Assembly, chooses to spend it in a different way. In other words, this money could go to a different use rather than being reverted. There's not a statute that says it has to be reverted.
All I know is AOE didn't have a need for it, so I'm not sure where it goes. I figured it just went back to the Treasury.
Okay. Yep. I think you're absolutely right. Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. We'll move on to the education fund portion of versions, and we'll welcome Brad James.
Thank you, me. Brad James, Agency of Education, here to talk about the reversion of the ed fund side. Same general idea. We appropriated money. We thought we were going to use money, ended up not using the money over the course of time, and we're giving it back. Generally speaking, to go to your point, Representative Conlon, it generally goes back into the education fund from my viewpoint. It gets used. It doesn't have to, but that's where it is, education fund money. So that's where it sits. So the first slide, so we're on slide, I don't know, we're on slide 10. is finance administration. I cannot tell you much about this one. But we are reverting about $1.6 million. This is not one of the ones that I have to deal with. So I don't know if Sean knows anything about this or if you have questions about it, but I don't know. I don't really know what this $1.6 million is from. But obviously, you can see on the slide, they're $250,000 obligated for purchase orders for the current year we're in.
Yeah, right. I can explain this one a little bit. So I'm sure this committee has heard of the SSDDMS project, and this is where it's funded from. The $250K purchase order is, a contract obligation on the Power School contract. I believe the SLDS is also funded out of this appropriation.
Okay. All right, next slide, slide 11, special education formula. We're big numbers here. We have about $83,000 in purchase orders that are obligated. We are asking to carry forward about just over $31 million, and I'll come back to that in a second. And we're reverting about $27 million, just over. The big numbers come from what we thought. We have just switched from a reimbursement model to this first year of the census block grant model. And there was a tail end coming through with the reimbursement model that we paid this fiscal year that is the cost from last fiscal year. And so we've always carried money forward with that. It turns out it looks like we've carried too much money forward, so we're reverting a sizable chunk back into it. And we're keeping that $31 million for unexpected costs. Costs are going up across the board in special education, as you're probably all aware. So we're never quite sure what's happening. We do know that with the census block grant, we have a much better idea of what the number we're putting out is, but we get unexpected costs coming. So this is kind of covering that tail end, that $31 million, covering that tail end plus unanticipated costs that we don't know about. But the $27 million, again, was being carried forward. Part of that was because we were trying to make sure that we were not asking for a huge amount of money towards that last year. Because what happens with special education is we have federal maintenance of effort requirements. And what they're looking at, they look at it at the school district level, or the LEA level, supervisory level, so we do special ed supervisory level now. And they also look at it at the state level. When they're looking at the state level, what they're looking at is how much money is appropriated, and they expect you to appropriate the same amount each year. Part of the idea behind Act 173 was giving districts flexibility in how they use that money, which theoretically down the line will kind of start to slow down some of that increased cost that we're seeing in special education, slow that growth down, which might mean that we don't need as much money, which could conceivably get us in trouble with the federal government. So that's what this money had initially been for, was kind of offset that, so we didn't have this big number at the end that kind of dropped down because we're appropriating less money this year. And so we overcapped, and so we're giving it back over the course of several years. That wasn't just a 1 year thing. So
Okay.
this is rolling forward in anticipation. And again, Act 173 kept getting put off, so it kept rolling years forward.
Right, it did.
What's the quick synopsis of the switch from the reimbursement model to the model that we currently have? Can you just?
The quick synopsis is school districts told us what they thought they were going to spend about a year in advance. And so we kind of budgeted according to that. We generally give back roughly 56% on the state pays for 56% of the regular special ed costs. Not the extraordinary costs that are above a certain threshold. And so what we do is, over time we give them money, we advance the money. Then the final one just happened a couple months ago is the reconciliation where we're giving the money back. So here's what we really owe you, and plus minus, et cetera. Now what we're doing this year is we are taking a census block grant based on a 3-year average daily membership. And we're saying you get this much this is what it's going to end up being. We're in transition phase at the moment. You get this much money per ADM. That's what you get to use for special education. In some cases, that's more than people needed because their special education costs were not as a percentage of the whole, were not as high, and other people it's less than what they needed. So we're working towards that right now. At this point, it's a transition. We can go into detail, but this is probably not the right time.
No, that's totally fine.
And so is the 30 million carry forward, just kind of, it's, I assume you guys coming up with a rough estimate?
It's a rough estimate, and I hopefully we over appropriate, don't have to come back to you for more. So I think we're over carrying, and we'll give it back next year.
And just so I understand sort of how the numbers work, you actually could have carried forward 57,333,000.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we could have asked. We couldn't have told no, I suppose, but we could have asked.
Oh, question over here, Representative Beck.
Brad, ever since I've been following the education fund, that special ed reversion has been a pretty significant number. Do you expect that it eventually become a somewhat insignificant number once the census block grant is fully in effect?
I think it will, Representative Beck. That was Representative Beck off the side. I think it will. What happened before I started doing this, probably in 2016 or 17, when we started switching from special education costs at the school district level up to the supervisory level, people were overestimating, it seemed quite often on a regular basis, as to what their costs were really going to be. So we ended up asking for more money than we ended up needing. It's always good to a degree, but it was pretty large. And it's been that way for a number of years. Now that we're past that reimbursement where we're basing on their estimates a year in advance, I think we will bring that reversion number down significantly.
Thank you.
And so if I could, just to follow on, you think that most of this reversion is coming from people overestimating what they need as opposed to under-delivering what it is that the students need, sort of unintentional savings that way?
That's a difficult question. First of all, it's two parts. It's one that we didn't need to because we were carrying money forward from prior years, so some of that. Also, numbers did come in a little lower than was anticipated. Whether people are getting what they need or not, I don't know. It's a good question. My understanding is that people are doing their best they can on the field. A lot of them are overwhelmed. There aren't enough people, not only just on the special ed side, but on the regular classroom side, para educators, bus drivers, et cetera. So I think it's a good question. I'm not qualified to really answer it directly, but I think people, they're getting the best they can. Is it everything they need? My guess would be probably not, especially after things that have happened the last couple of years.
I will also just as a school board member, and we were going through our budget, we were spending less because we couldn't hire people to do resources. So yeah, it's a good point. Yes, Rita.
I'm just wondering, just in a very broad sense, there's been Act 46, there's the census-based funding, there's Act 173, there's student waiting, all kind of initiatives, not just to lower special ed costs, but, hopefully in terms of prevention, early intervention to hopefully, avoid the need to identify so many students. Is there any way we're kind of looking at that, like, did this actually do that?
I think at this point it's too early to say. I can check with a couple of people to see if anybody is checking it. I'm not, but I can check with people to see. But I think it's a little early to say.
Okay.
We've done Act 46, which was the merger, which started in 2015 on up until now.
Right.
There are a few dismergers happening, for lack of a better term. And then we just started the census block grant this year. Ideally, the student waiting, which comes into effect in FY25, so a year and a half from now. Ideally, that and the census block grant were supposed to go hand in hand, but it didn't happen that way. So it's going to be a staggered start, and so it may make the hoped for changes be not apparent until, assuming they happen, until later on the weekend.
We can wait.
Well, we have to.
Well, I didn't want to have to talk to anybody because it just seemed a waste of time.
Okay.
But, just curious if someone, is there someone?
Yeah, I'll check. It would be on our program side. We've had a little turnover there too. I don't know if I've spoken to Chris Case or not, but I'll talk to him.
Great, thank you.
All right, anything else, special education? Big kahuna. Okay, slide 12 is state place students. We're asking to carry over forward $5 million. We're reverting about 1.4. State place students is one of those costs we're never quite sure about because it varies from year to year to year. And the costs are quite variable. So we're asking to carry forward another 5,000 or not 5,000, a couple of zeros there, Brett, 5 million forward to help with this year's costs.
Representative Brady.
Do you know roughly how many state place students we have?
The ones that I see counted probably around 350. I see them because they get incorporated into what is now currently equalized people, so they're incorporated into the unweighted long-term day or long-term unweighted or weighted ADM, whatever we're going to go to in Act 127.
Probably we should define state place student for all of us.
Yeah, state place, it changed. The definition changed 4 or 5 years ago. State place student is in the simplistic terms, which is how I think. It's kids who can't stay in their homes anymore. They're largely taken over by DCF and they're DCF custody, the Division for Children and Families. And they're placed elsewhere. And they quite often continue at the same school, which is best for them if they can, if that's available. But quite often they're not, they get moved around quite a bit. But it's basically kids who are removed from their homes for a variety of reasons. And they're under state custody.
Is that a foster child, for example, or is it a state?
Foster child would be a state place.
Thank you.
Has there been any strong up or down since COVID?
We're looking, I think we've gone up a little bit. I'm trying to remember because when we do state place students, I'm not doing this current year, I'm using the last school year. That's how the law works. So I'm looking at the FY22 year and then thinking back to 21 and 2020, just kind of roughly in the head. I think the numbers have gone up, have ticked up. I couldn't tell you how many.
Oh, gosh.
Anything else to state place? Okay, then slide 13. Flexible pathways, this is the other half of what Sean was talking about. Flexible pathways covers not only dual enrollment, which is what Sean was specifically talking about, but it covers early college, high school completion, or something else that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But again, we are asking to carry forward about 1.5 million and reverting about 1.8 million dollars. Again, it's one of those, especially with early college and dual enrollment, we never know how many people are going to come. Early college keeps growing. I was a little surprised to see dual enrollment coming back. I haven't seen those student counts. But generally speaking, early college has been increasing. For those of you who are new to early college, it's basically where students take their 12th grade students take their final year of high school in a college setting and are truly a college student. And so they're earning credits. And more students have been taking that because why not if you can? And again, as Sean said, with dual enrollment, it's 11th and 12th graders who can take up to 2 college credit courses, either at a college or taught via one of the high school teachers who's qualified to do that. And then there's high school adult education funding, that's general fund. I'm trying to remember what the other one is, but I'm thinking about flexible pathways. So that's kind of where those pieces are. Right. Slide 14, education spending grant. We are asking to carry forward $1 million. We usually do just because we're unsure what's going to happen, making sure that hopefully that our estimates we talked about last time I was here were correct, but giving us a little wiggle room. We're reverting almost $12 million, 11.7. Roughly 5 to 6 of that is because we over appropriated in 22. But we also made a mistake on our end with South Burlington of $6.8 million. Their budget came in late. We were having a few personnel issues. Not issues. We were having some personnel twist ups a little bit, and something got dropped when their budget got delayed, and they were paid when they shouldn't have been. So there's money coming back. They were basically double paid. So this includes that $6.8 million.
This is, and then when we say education spending grant, this is the dollars.
This is the big line on the education fund. This is the big line.
$1 million carry forward, I mean, hardly, such a small number. By comparison, it hardly seems necessary, but okay.
It's $1 billion budget.
It's almost a $2 billion budget. In fact, it's over 2 billion, I believe, this year. I think it's 2.075,
Is
something.
that what federal funds?
Excuse me?
Is that including federal funds?
No, it does not include federal funds. The federal funds is separate. I thank you for reminding me to talk about federal funds,
Yeah.
because I just forgot. It's not unusual for us to revert money from the education fund, because again, as I said, if you recall from last time in my long harangue, we're estimating what we need, and we try to be on the conservative side, meaning we're trying to be high, so we come in low at the final, so people's tax rates are coming down as opposed to going up. So that's what we're trying
And
to do.
again, 11 million is compared to a $2 billion budget is right. It's pretty good estimating.
But it helps. Okay. And then slide 15, small schools grants. These are not only small schools grant, but merge support grants. And again, just to refresh your memory, is for those school districts that voluntarily merged initially under Act 46. If they became a unified school district, they were able to take any small schools grants their unifying districts had 2 years prior, and they became permanent merger support grant, permanent being until they close the school building itself or until the legislature decides it's not permanent. Okay, so small schools grants contains both the small schools grant and the grant. There are still a few small schools out there that get small school grants. Small school grants end in FY25 when the weighting kicks in, because there are small school weights for sparsity and such. So we're carrying forward about $150,000, and we're reverting just over $34,000. Slide 16 is technical education. Again, technical education, we're never quite sure of that number because we're estimating what this usually generally covers is salaries. There's salary assistance in Title 16. And what we're doing is we're estimating what that is. And once again, we try to be a little on the high side, so we're not coming back in the budget adjustment act saying, oops, we need more money. We'd rather give you money back than ask you for more money again. So we're always estimating on this one, and we usually estimate a little bit high. So this number is about in the ballpark of what we usually get back, I think. So we're asking for carry forward being $412 for sub-grant $412,000 for sub-grant obligations, and we're reverting roughly $1.5 million. And I believe that was the last one, because the last one says questions. Before we get to federal grants, questions?
So just again, this is information that we're going to use when we write a letter to the Appropriations Committee as to the Budget Adjustment Act. Yeah, Representative Austin.
This may not have anything to do with your presentation, but I remember meeting with the technical ed directors who were asking us to look at a 3-year average. I think it was during COVID.
That is separate and apart from this.
It is, okay. Yep. Sorry.
That's good. I think I remember that one, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Representative Williams.
I just needed to be a little more clear in my mind. Is it true that the carry forward money is money that you want to hang on to? And the reversion money is what
Yes.
what happens to that?
The carry forward money is money we think we still need for
Right.
X, Y, and Z. We didn't spend it at the time, but we still need it.
Right.
And the reversion money is we thought we were going to need it and don't.
And it
And are
goes.
giving it back to the education fund.
Okay,
So it's going back to the education fund, it kind of drops to the bottom line and can offset the cost for the coming year.
and the money we need to discuss in our committee would be the reversion money?
Reversions, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Representative Brady.
This is a question about trying to understand state government process, probably. General fund reversions. If we, whoever, the legislature, the community is saying that there's a need for more capacity at AOE or higher salaries at AOE to attract people, is there flexibility within AOE that is sort of lost when that money is reverted, or are state processes sort of so regimented that it happens kind of devoid of that? Like, is there some money to play with to
Not-
deal with
not
some of
really.
those things, or that's not really?
No, not really. Generally speaking, it's pretty regimented, as you said. That's
Yep.
probably the right word.
Yep.
We can't say, oh, we need somebody and then just go out and hire somebody. We have to go through a process and ask for permission to get a position out of the pool. And I don't do that, so I don't know it well. But we have to go through a whole process to do that. We can't bump money up. We can't bump salaries up, even though I think it'd be a great idea. Because overall, covered by a contract, by the state contract. We can't, sometimes we have some money sitting there that's a little bit discretion that we can start something new if we wanted to. And
Yep.
that's one of the things with the federal money we do get a set aside in each federal set, with most federal monies that we can use for specific purposes within bounds set. But to answer the question directly, it's pretty regimented and it's not flexible.
Okay.
Ted has a question.
Just for the record, Ted Fisher, Vermont Agency of Education, the agency's director of communications and legislative affairs. Just having recently done this, to use Lindsay as an example, sorry, Lindsay. Upon signature of the governor's budget adjustment, or of the governor's budget, the governor's signature of the budget last year, Human Resources Department sends out essentially an email to anyone who has a new position in the budget. We have a process of going through to either use an existing class as a job description in state government, or create a new class. For Lindsay, in Lindsay's case, we created a new class, the Policy and Communications Specialist. So there's work associated with that, and then pay grade is assigned to that position, and all of that sort of mechanics works, and then you can post. It's kind of the process that works, and then the recruitment process takes as long as it takes.
Can I ask a quick follow-up then? So if salaries are a constraint on the agency attracting folks and retaining folks, that's really a HR across state government kind of meta level concern?
More so when as Ted said, there are classifications and
Yep.
where salaries levels. You can come in different experiences based on what the person is. So you're not necessarily starting at the very if you start at the very beginning, you can be placed here. So but there's class, so you're on a certain row, but you might go on a different column.
Is that based on region?
No, it's not. Transportation might have that, but I don't think anybody else in state government does. At least not that I know of. But it's certainly not in education. I can say that definitively.
Just to add on slightly to that, the assignment of pay grades is done by the human. So we submit a paperwork to Human Resources Department, and they will assign the pay grade and formalize the class and do all of that work. So it isn't. I would. If you have more questions that I want to check with Secretary French to see to what extent he would be able to speak to it directly, but it might be questions for DHR.
And this may be a bigger topic for another day, but we have certainly heard time and time again that because of salaries at the AOE versus salaries in the public sector, not even the private sector, the ability to attract the people that you need is challenging, like really challenging. Representative Buss.
I did, because I'm a newbie here, and so I have no previous year comparison or years comparison off the top of your head. Is this dramatically different from previous years? I mean, I know you spoke about the one like $5 million mistake, but is with the reversions? Yeah.
Special education is high. It's higher than normal this year. Because we're giving a little bit more money back to them if needed. The education one is high. It's usually we're not. If you took that almost $7 million out, you'd be closer to $5 million. That's more in the ballparks. These are 3 to 5, if I recall correctly. That 10 to 5 being on the high side. I think some of the other ones are kind of pretty much where they usually are. Again, tech ed. I'm looking at that because it's $1.50. 1.5 million is a pretty high. It's a good sized number for this representative concept. In the big scheme of things, it's chump change for lack of a better term. But usually we're around there. I'd like to bring that number down, but we never know what's going to happen because sometimes they have they're large enough that they get a second position that we have to fund, and we never know that until after it happens. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to be on the cautious side. We basically grow those by I think it's 5% annually. That's what our estimate is for the budget.
Okay.
So just for the committee, I will be crafting with final approval from all of you, but just a memo to send to appropriations. And what I'm hearing is no real objections to what we heard previously about from Jill Briggs Campbell about giving the agency the flexibility to spend that other ARPA money, that kind of leftover 3 million potentially. I think the only thing I might come back to bring up to the committee is this issue over some additional money for the state board from that reversion to assist with their need for their own legal counsel outside of the AOE. We'll take that up at a moment. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Brad.
You're welcome. Good to see you all.
All right, well, we will stand adjourned until lunch.